So we're going to start now. Who are some of these great thinkers in finance? I might add another one down here at the bottom. We'll see. But Dr. Lowe at MIT is another one we could add. There's so many that we could add, but these are ones that I think really meet the requirements of this class of thinking unconventionally. That they have something to say that I think not only should impact how finance is taught and understood, but would definitely give you an advantage in your jobs to know what these thinkers have said. You've obviously almost all of you have heard of Taleb, Taleb, The Black Swan. I do recommend reading his books. Very, very interesting. Kahneman, a Nobel Prize winner in economics. We'll walk through his theories. I have a whole presentation with Annie Duke, my favorite writer now. Just incredible things she says about risk. And Doug Hubbard, instead of talking, we'll talk through him, but I want you to watch a video that he has. Hopefully it will still be available. I'll test the link before I send it to you and go through a series of questions. And I'll talk about some. I went through his class last summer, and very, very interesting. And I'll talk some about what he talks about with calibration and understanding the magnitude of our uncertainty and how we actually measure that. So better ways of defining, measuring, and mitigating risk. So let's start with Taleb. So with Taleb, what I want to do is first step back and let's look at the big picture of what he's talking about. So these, as I mentioned before, these are the 4 books I'm using here. Black Swan and Fooled by Randomness is where most of the quotes come from. I do like Anti-Fragile, and I'll talk some about that one, and then just a couple of quotes from this last book. I'm not going to read these quotes to you, but I'm going to highlight a few things. You'll notice in my notes I highlighted a few areas just so we get to them. So let's talk big picture. So his arguments are, number 1, finance relies too much on normal distribution. So that's the first one. These are highlighted in blue in your notes. Number 2, we reward people in finance for things that are really nothing more than just random luck. And you'll see some of the quotes there. I absolutely believe that. I've seen it in my own career many times over. Number 3, we're often fooled by randomness. It's very similar to number 2. But we see patterns. We need to tell our boss something. We need a model. We need some basis for making a decision. Randomness comes up, but it's randomness that looks like there's a pattern there. We go with it because now we have something to make a decision on, and we're actually fooled by that randomness. It's amazing how many patterns that seem like they're telling us something. Random noise can really create those kind of patterns all the time. Number 4 is Taleb has a very low opinion of experts and elites, that we should be listening to them far less than we are, and that they know far less than they think they do. Number 5, his idea of black swans they happen very rarely, but they're the most important thing. And we tend to ignore them because we can't predict them. Coronavirus is a great example of that. Something that just completely changes everything. But it's so rare. So what we usually do in finance is we just throw them out because a normal curve says they don't exist, they don't happen. But he says that's actually what you should be focused on, are those rare black swan events, because in the long run, they determine everything. They decide everything. That's number 5. Number 6, we're easily fooled by calmness. And he's going to make the argument that we like things that are very low volatility, but that have horrendous downside tail risk. He says we prefer that, and very much to our detriment. And we'll talk what he means there. I think it's an important concept. He says we should do the exact opposite. Instead of betting on low volatility with huge downside risk, we should instead bet on fight tails and unexpected high volatility. We should do the exact opposite. We should look for those things that every once in a while there's an extreme case, and make sure we benefit rather than getting harmed by those extreme cases. That's the 7th thing. He's not a big fan of forecasting. He says he doesn't say we shouldn't forecast, but he says to be careful. I think Doug Hubbard has some comments that might seem contradictory to that, but we'll see how maybe not. we studied the article about forecasting recently, so there's a lot of discussion about exactly what are we trying to do with a forecast. So I think Hubbard and Taleb probably agree, but they sound like they're saying something different. So we'll have to try to figure that out. So that gives us those not 8 things that Taleb's going to say. So let's hit a few of these in this session, and we'll hit a few more in the next. I don't want to rush through these. I do recommend that as I go through these, you hit pause and read the entire quote, and then hit play, and you can hear my discussion about the quotes. I prefer you do that, and because I actually think you should read the entire quotes. They're not very lengthy quotes. None of them are all that lengthy, but they're very powerful. Now, one thing he talks about is mediocristan and extremistan. Those are these fictitious countries that he's invented. Mediocristan is the world where the normal distribution works really, really well. So if you ask what's the average height in San Antonio, what's the range, what's a reasonable range, it's something that follows a normal distribution fairly well. And when you look at that range, if you look at 500, let's say men over the age of 20, you look at the data, maybe you take a sample size of 500, and after you do that, your data says the probability of a 7-foot tall man is very, very low. Maybe there's a 1% chance, but it is possible. The probability of a 12-foot tall man is absolutely impossible. It cannot happen. And you're probably right. That's probably true. We know with the Spurs here in town, we have David Robinson and Tim Duncan. There are a couple of 7-foot tall people in the city, but there are not many of them. And even if you didn't have a single 7-foot tall person in your sample of 500, your distribution would still say there's a chance that they exist. It wouldn't say it's impossible. It would say a 15-foot tall man would be impossible. So it works well. Extremistan looks normal most of the time, but the tails are much fatter than we realize. So if instead of looking at heights, you look at wealth. If you looked at wealth using normal distributions, the probability of someone with $100 million in San Antonio would be absolutely impossible. The distribution, you look at it, you have 500 people, you look at distribution, you ask, what's the probability there's someone with $100 million be impossible? But then you have Red McCombs, who's a billionaire. Maybe the Butt family, HEB family are multimillionaires or billionaires. We know they exist in San Antonio, but a sample size of 500 will not tell you that. So those are the two worlds he talks about. He says a lot of the world is mediocristan, and the statistics we use, normal curves, work really, really well, but a lot of finance is actually extremistan, and yet we use normal distributions that don't tell you the tells of extremistan, and we use them very much to our detriment. I may show you some data here pretty soon, looking at the S&P 500 and just seeing the extreme numbers we've had this year. So he says history tells us what has happened, not what is going to happen. So let's take, what's the probability of someone with $100 million living in San Antonio? You get a lot of data. You have a sample size of 500, 800, 1,000, and your data still says it's impossible. That person doesn't exist. But then Red McCombs walks into your sample size, and suddenly one piece of information is informative. So normal curves, generally you say more information is great, but if you have an extreme case, something that only happens once in 1,000 times or once in 1,000,000 times, but it's so far out in the tail that a normal curve would say it is impossible, but it is possible. In that case, more data doesn't help you because all it does is make you more confident that, wow, this thing doesn't exist. But in extremistan, one person walking in, one billionaire walking in tells you a tremendous amount of information. So very different than we've seen in the past. Normal curves, seen with a lot of other statistics, especially what you took in your statistics class. Probably the normal curve worked pretty well in the type of analysis you did there. But in a lot of finance, it doesn't work because the tells are just far, far fatter, far more extreme than the normal curves would tell us. So if we're fragile or vulnerable to tell events, the normal curve is going to really hurt you. So, and one reason is the normal curve really gets flat, extremely flat in the tails. So a 4 sigma event happens twice as much as a 4.15. There's not much difference in those. You know, you remember we took mean minus a number of standard deviations times the standard deviation. If you're just going from 4 to 4.15, you're not adding much to your value at risk, and yet a 4 happens twice as much as a 4.15. These are almost the same numbers, and as far as our knowledge from a rounding standpoint, they really are the same number. We're not that precise in our numbers, and yet the normal curve is exactly that precise. And then you get out a far more, and I don't know how you got these numbers because I can't get Excel to go out much past 8, but a 20 sigma event is a trillion times more likely than a 21 standard deviation event. But in these type of things, 20 versus 21, we really have no clue. We don't have enough. These things happen so infrequently. How can we possibly know? We're talking something happens once every trillion to a trillion power time. You know, it's so infrequent. How can we possibly know if the true number is 20 or 21? We just don't have enough data. So a small measurement error can really underestimate the probability of something happening. So we tend to, with sample size, if something's not in the sample, and we took a large sample size, we say the absence of proof is proof of absence. That's why he called his book Black Swan. People in the UK said there are no black swans, and that's because all they'd ever seen was a white swan, yet in another country, they had black swans. But they said, hey, we just have never seen that before. So, you know, he uses it somewhat humorously when he talks about O.J. Simpson. He said, I can prove O.J. Simpson absolutely was not a killer because I've seen him several times on TV. I mean, hundreds of times on TVs, and he's never killed anyone. You know, that's really bad statistics, but we do that a lot in finance. And the normal curve just doesn't allow for large deviations. I'll show you at the beginning of the next session just how far off the stock market is from a normal distribution. We talked about correlations, and he says exactly what we talked about when we talk about correlation. We talk about correlation as if it's something real, something that exists, but correlations are so unstable that it all depends on the period for which you looked at it. Exactly what we're talking about, these environments, and yet we misuse correlations and normal curves to give us more comfort that we have a good understanding of what's going on in the world. And he says once you get used to the bell curve, it's hard not to use it. We use it a lot in finance, and he's saying we need to use it much less. His second argument, so I'll come back to that when I look at the stock market in the next session, but let's jump ahead. Finance gets paid for random luck. So the market was up 8%, we were up 10%. Oh, let's pay him a big bonus because he beat the market by 2%. His alpha was 2%, as we said on project 2. And yet the next year he underperforms by 6%. I remember making a presentation to our exec council, and I made the comment that one of our managers, our international manager, he had a really good 2 or 3 year run. I said, I don't know if it's luck or skill, but he's done really well for us. And the president of the investment company said, you don't have numbers like that unless it's skill. And that manager blew up the next year, had a horrible year. And actually, I think that firm is actually going under since then. Yeah, we were fooled by random luck, and we thought, wow, that manager's great, give him more business. And yeah, it was pretty obvious there was either maybe it was skill, and then they just had a really unlucky year. But either way, okay, let's pause this for a second. All right, so what I want to do, we'll get into this random luck, but let me show you the S&P really quickly. So I brought the S&P 500 back to 1928. So these are the daily returns of the S&P 500 back to 1928. You can see the daily average is essentially 0, 3 basis points. I used to tell students the standard deviation of the stock market is about 1%. It used to be slightly less than 1%, but that was because the S&P only went back to the 1950s. Now that they've pushed it back to the 1928, and you have the Great Depression that pushed the standard deviation up a little bit, but about 1% is not a bad estimate. And so what I did is look at this year and how many standard deviations are these days. And I took some of the biggest days here. So we had an 11% drop. We had a 9% rise in the S&P, which I think is the highest one-day increase in S&P ever. This is probably the second largest S&P fall versus the October 87 fall. And then I say, how many days in 1,000 years? So 1,000 years is 1,000 times 250 days. So out of 250,000 days, how many times would you expect to see a 4% day in only 26 days? So in 1,000 years, you have 26 times. Most years you wouldn't have any like that at all. It gets even greater here with 17 days, 58 days, and here it's since it can't happen. You would in 1,000 years you would not be expected to see that day, and here's 2 days together, and actually 3 days together. I mean, this is one of the most. I looked at this versus history, and this range right in here, these 7 days, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, those 7, 8 days really are the most volatile 8 days we've ever had in the market, with the exception of one short period during the Great Depression. But so this year in the stock market, we're seeing volatility we have never seen since the stock market crash of 28, 29. Just amazing, even more volatile than what we saw in the 2008 financial crisis. And I thought that was pretty bad when I was going through that. So you look at that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days, 5 days out of 7 days where we had something happen that should have been impossible according to normal distribution. But just incredible days. And here, according to the normal distribution, this day, a 10 sigma event is impossible. It just cannot happen. That's why I said in the notes with Taleb talking about a 20 sigma event, I don't even know how he got the numbers. You need a pretty hefty calculator to be able to figure that out. So using the normal curve, it ignores the fact that these tail events happen much more frequently. We just saw in 5 out of 7 days something that should have been impossible, but each 5 of those days it happened. So obviously the stock market is not as normally distributed as we would hope or think, but and yet we make a lot of decisions in our investing based on that. So getting to this second point, we get fooled by randomness. He uses this concept of Russian roulette, which I think works really, really well, where with our customers, we're essentially making bets that on normal days do okay, but they blow up horribly, horribly badly every once in a while. So it's like we're holding a gun to our customer's head and pulling the trigger. It's got a chamber, maybe 1,000 chambers in it. And every time we pull the trigger and it doesn't shoot, we charge our client money. But every time we pull the trigger, obviously the probability is going up the next time. So we're kidding ourselves that we're really helping our clients. Essentially what we're doing is we're exposing them to tremendous downside risk. So when the coronavirus or the 2008 financial crisis hits, or the 2000 .com crisis, when those things hit and our models say they're impossible, our customers are going to be absolutely shocked at how much money they lose, because we're essentially playing Russian roulette with their money. And Jack Bogle, you can read, what I have here. We've moved from an ownership society to an agency society. An ownership society, we'd be holding the guns to our own head and playing Russian roulette. We'd probably be a little more cautious. But since we're gambling with other people's money, we're not as concerned. We've stopped managing people's money, and we instead become marketers of random outcomes. Boy, I've noticed that so much over my career. So I don't like the way this industry is set up. I wish it were set up very differently. Right now we're focused on alpha, beating the market. I think we should be much more focused on risk management and asset liability management. We shouldn't be compensated for forecasting and being lucky every once in a while and trying to beat the market. I think that's a loser's game. So that's my bias, that we should be paid in finance for how good we are at risk management and asset liability management. But yeah, it's definitely a debate. So here's some of his quotes. There's a reference point argument. So people say, wow, look, this person did this, and they won, so that must be the right thing to do. But we don't look at the 1,000 people that did the exact same thing and they lost. So we say, hey, that person bought a lottery ticket and he won the lottery. He must be really smart. He must be really good. He must know how to buy lottery tickets. We ignore the hundreds of thousands of people who bought lottery tickets and lost. So Taleb says, don't compute odds from the vantage point of the winner. Do it from the vantage point of who all started in the cohort. Because if you have a million people, yeah, one or two of them are going to do great, but that can be entirely expected during just the random luck. So often the richest traders are the worst traders, mainly because they just happen to be the best fit for the latest cycle. This doesn't happen to dentists and pianists. If someone sat down and played a piano sonata by Beethoven without missing a note, I seriously doubt that could happen because of random chance. If someone sat down and played, I mean, it's possible. They say, a trillion monkeys could write War and Peace, I guess, a trillion to a trillion. Yeah, it's possible. But if a monkey types War and Peace perfectly without any typos, I'm going to do a little more research and see what's going on. If someone sits down and plays a Beethoven piano sonata perfectly without missing a note, I'm going to assume they are a good pianist, that it wasn't random luck. However, someone beating the market and having a great return, I'm not going to assume, wow, they must be really skilled, because it could be random luck. And we'll talk about that more when we talk about Annie Duke. She talks about something called resulting, which I think is extremely important in this context, that so much of life is randomness, and yet we try to assign skill to people's luck. And he talks about this, if you have thousands of managers and you do a game of 50-50, 50%, over 5 years, 313 of these 1,000 are going to have done really well. They would have made money 5 years in a row. It's 50-50 chance, but just pure random luck. You do 0.5 to the fifth power, you would come up with 313 are going to do well. Pure luck. But what would we do? We would interview these people on TV to ask about their strategy, how do they do so well. Even though the statistics in finance are exactly the statistics that we expect in a random world, the number of managers that beat the market is actually slightly lower than random chance would expect, because there's actually some negative managers who do well are actually more likely to do badly the next time around. So we actually we put weight on, this is what I mean by randomness. We say, wow, they beat the market, it must be good. We don't even ask the question, could it just be pure random luck? So this, you have these 313 managers and they do well, and then a few of these 313, they'll lose the next year or the year after that, and then we'll write articles about, wow, what did he do? What did he change? How did he get to be such a failure? That has happened with Warren Buffett several times. He's gone from being a genius to having lost his touch so many times in his career. It's just pretty hilarious. There seems to be no foolish thing as such thing as a foolish decision if you get results. So we'll talk about this again. Annie Duke talks about resulting. I really love the concept of resulting. The link between the skill of the CEO and company performance is actually pretty tenuous, because there's so much randomness in this world. All right, let's stop this one here, and next time we'll come back and talk these next few. Hopefully we'll get through a few more. I love this topic, so sorry it's taking me a while. What I'd love for you to do when you do your class notes is, if you see something, so read through all these quotes before I go through them. If you see something I didn't highlight, bring that out in your notes. What did you find interesting? I still encourage you to read Taleb. Don't rely just on my quotes. There's a lot more to his books than just in my quotes. But I think I've captured the essence of his books. I don't think I've left any major theme out.